Hi there, this is Patrick of the Liberty Lighthouse. As you can tell, Trevor's not here right now, but we have a special report for him at the end of the current events section about debunking Scandinavian Socialism. So, for our first event, we are going to talk about, obviously, what most people have been focusing on this week, and that is the rally, protest, and eventual fight in Charlottesville, Virginia. This story we're not going to spend nearly as much time on, simply because I'm sure you've already been inundated by the everything that's going on. But Saturday night, a rally called Unite the Right was scheduled. They did have their permits there. This was not an illegal rally, but it was around the statue of Robert E. Lee that the city of Charlottesville was looking at removing. This rally soon turned violent. Black Lives Matters protesters, along with Antifa, ended up showing up, and the protesters from Antifa and Black Lives Matter ended up clashing with the Unite the Right protesters. It did end up turning fatal when a Dodge Challenger drove by James Alex Fields Jr., a white supremacist, killed one of the counter-protesters and injured many. Now, I am not going to discuss anything about James, because he's a disgusting person who does not deserve any more airtime than he has already been afforded. And truthfully, I don't think that we need to discuss this more, because something that Trevor and I, before airing, discussed is that the media, when they keep talking about it like they have, they make the terrorist, and that is truly what he is a terrorist, they make him infamous, and that creates copycats. Truthfully, if Antifa and Black Lives Matter wanted to be more effective, they would have just not shown up. Media would have just not covered it, and these small group of white supremacists just would not have been covered, and they would have just been starved because nobody would know about what was happening, and it would have not been violent. And I really think that the people, this mainstream media that keeps focusing on these fringe groups, makes them larger. Next, what I want to cover is the big story out of Spain. In Barcelona, Spain, there seemed to have been a terrorist attack. Someone drove a Fiat van through people in a crowded street. Now, one thing to point out, unlike at Charlottesville, since there's not some protesters, the people are in the streets, because that's pretty common in cities like that, is that they'll have pedestrian-only streets, and that was what this was. This killed 13 men, with many seriously injured, to the point that number could go up of fatalities. Originally, the suspect was thought to be Musa Akbur. He was killed in the Cambrils attack that happened later at night. The new lead suspect for the plea is now Younes Abuakub. I don't know how to pronounce his name. So basically, earlier Wednesday evening, an explosion ripped through a house in a small town called Alcanar, 200 kilometers south of Barcelona. One person died. Police Chief Josep Luis Trapero said it appeared the residents at the house had been preparing an explosive device. A Catalan government official says a cell might have intended to use gas canisters in the Las Rambles attack, and that was the street they drove down in Barcelona, was called Las Rambles. And then in Barcelona, a white Fiat van drives down Las Rambles in central Barcelona, killing 13 people and injuring scores more. The driver fled on foot. And then in Sant Just Desvern, a car is driven towards officers at a checkpoint on the outskirts of Barcelona. They open fire. A man is later found dead in the passenger seat of the car with stab wounds. The dead man is not linked to the Las Rambles attack, officials say, but investigators are ongoing. One theory is that the car was stolen and the man was killed by a carjacker who is still at large. And then in Cambrils, a second vehicle attack takes place in the resort south of Barcelona. Police kill 5 terrorist suspects, was said to be linked to the Las Rambles attack. They include Masu Akabar, the original suspect. Police later say another man, Younes Abuakub, again the guy, I don't know how to pronounce his name, is being hunted. Now, we have, as some people know, I do like Breitbart, and I am a fan of Steve Bannon. Well, on Friday, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders announced Friday that Bannon and the newly appointed Chief of Staff John Kelly mutually agreed that Bannon would be stepping down as chief strategist. Now, unlike what the fake news is saying, he was not fired. Mr. Bannon actually did hand in his resignation August 7th, but the entire White House was all hands on deck dealing with the Charlottesville attack. He has since been reinstated as executive chairman of Breitbart News, which I wish him the best of luck. He says that he is declaring war for President Trump's agenda, and that Mr. Bannon believes that that Mr. Trump is surrounded by Democrats and globalists who are all working to stop his agenda. So best luck to Mr. Bannon on hearing that. Now this last one, because this was a week full of depressing news about terrorist attack in Barcelona, white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, we decided we could use some pick-me-up, and that is about Chris Cantwell. He is a white supremacist neo-Nazi who if you've seen the famous footage from the Charlottesville attack of people shouting with tiki torches, "Jews will not replace us," he was the head of that mob. But he was the star of a web documentary that Vice and HBO were doing on scene at the Unite the Right rally, when he was saying how he would be happy to kill racial minorities. But soon that was aired and was seen by 30 million people. A video was leaked soon after of him crying like a little bitch and talking about how he found out that there was a warrant for his arrest. Initially, I thought the warrant was for his protest, in which I said he said some horrible things, but he wasn't violent. Turns out he was violent. He used explosives to try and injure counter-protesters, and he also used gas bombs. Now, I am going to leave a video link below so that you can see the man baby crying. And in case you wanted to send this guy hate mail, which he definitely deserves it, he is a white supremacist, his website is ChristopherCantwell.com. Now, he has been banned on Twitter, and so I do want to say that the Twitter held by another Christopher Cantwell of @IfYouCantwell is not related. That is a writer for some AMC show. He seems to be, by all appearances, a very nice guy. Christopher Cantwell is not on Twitter, the shitty racist guy. And so, again, his website is Christopher Cantwell, and you're more than welcome to leave him hate mail. And with that, I think that is our show on current events. A lot of our show relies on discussion, and I may be crazy and talk to myself, but I don't feel like doing that right now. So, I just want to encourage you all to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and stick around. We got a special segment from Trevor about debunking Scandanavian Socialism. You can spread it around to your liberal friends, and they may cry. All right, that has been the Liberty Lighthouse this week. See us next week when both hosts are here and we can proceed with a proper show. Enjoy the special piece by Trevor, and you guys have a great week. Also, please leave us comments of things you want us to talk about, criticisms, compliments. We would love to see your guys' thought. If you have something you want to talk about, we would be more than happy to discuss that. Have a great day, and keep rocking.
Today, every American socialist paradise and source of factual information comes from Scandinavia. Progressive hero Bernie Sanders wants the United States to adapt their policies. Well, I'm here to ruin socialism for you today. I will be discussing and debunking the myth socialist Scandinavia is. Topics covered today will be economics, personal freedom, and happiness. Now, before I really get into it, I just want to emphasize that I'm not going to be discussing Venezuela, a country that is currently falling apart from their socialist policies, and that Bernie Sanders said the American dream is more apt to be realized in. But that's only because leftists say that Venezuela isn't real socialism, and Scandinavia is real socialism, right? Wrong. It all sucks. So, Scandinavian countries seem to have the best deal government can buy. Free healthcare, free education, free everything. They don't have to worry about it because they aren't paying for it. Except they are paying for it, and it's pretty expensive. The top tax rates are insane in Scandinavian countries. In Denmark, it's 60.4%. In Sweden, it's 56.9%. In Norway, it's 39%, and to compare in the United States, it's 46.3%. Now, the US number is a little deceiving, and we'll get into that later. The top marginal tax rate in Denmark of 60% applies to all incomes that are over 1.2 the average income. So to put that in perspective for Americans, that means all income over $60,000, because the average income in the U.S. is $50,000. $60,000 gets taxed at 60%. Sweden and Norway have fairly similar systems and, their top rates. Sweden's top marginal tax rate is 56.9%, and that applies to all income 1.5 times the median. In Norway, their tax rate of 39% applies to all incomes 1.6 times the average Norwegian income. That means in the US, if you were to follow Sweden's tax system, you are taxed at 56.9% if you make more than $75,000 a year. If you follow Norway's tax system, that means you are taxed at 39% for incomes greater than $80,000. Now, going back to the United States, having a higher rate at 46.8%, and that's including state and federal income taxes, that rate kicks in at 8.5 times the average U.S. income, which is around $400,000. And even then, very few people end up paying that amount. And funny enough, as leftists love to attack business because that is their rallying cry, corporate income taxes in the United States are actually higher than it is in Scandinavia. The U.S. has a 39.1% rate, and the Scandinavian average is 24.5%. But luckily, President Donald Trump is wanting to drop it to a 20 to 25% rate. So, thank you, President Trump, for that. Now, going back to the left and their rallying cries, one of the biggest things they wanted was a $12 or $15 minimum wage, depending if you supported Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. Well, Scandinavia doesn't even have those things called minimum wages. Unions didn't want them because they believed that it would take away bargaining powers that they'd have. And it's weird because it almost seems like minimum wage does not benefit workers. And continuing on, it's a little bit of an offset claim to totally call Scandinavia socialist because they're actually one of the easiest places to conduct business. Yes, they tax the life out of their citizens, but they rank in the top 10 easiest countries to do business in. Socialists in America have a massive misunderstanding of Scandinavia's economy. While they have extremely high income taxes, they have a relatively free market when it comes to regulation. They are far from a true capitalist society, but they are not nearly as socialist as Bernie Sanders makes it out to be. Now, of course, every socialist, besides wanting to be economically taken care of, believe in personal freedom, right? Well, Scandinavia also sucks in personal freedom. They have very strict gun laws, and I'll just start off by listing the different countries and their ridiculous laws. Now, in Sweden, you must have a specific and valid reason to carry a weapon. It is a privilege, not a right, in Sweden. Now, it doesn't get much better in Norway. A license is required to own a gun, and the owner must provide a written statement saying why he or she wants one. Many different categories of guns, including automatic weapons and some powerful handguns, are banned altogether. Transporting a weapon to a public place is also covered under the ridiculous statist laws. The owner must have a good reason for carrying the weapon. They must ensure that it is unloaded and concealed from view, but not on the person. and the weapon has to be kept under constant supervision. Now, Denmark also gets much, much worse. Well, not much worse because it's already pretty bad. So, they only allow private firearm possession for hunting and sport shooting. And holders of licenses and members of rifle clubs with a valid weapon permit are able to possess certain models of shotguns and rifles. Now, maybe you're sort of like the gun control Democrat who isn't very offended by the fact that Scandinavia pretty much doesn't want you to have a gun. But one thing that, your progressive Democrats are normally, or at least say they're geared toward, is drug laws. Well, in Scandinavia, that also is horrible. While they're not as ridiculously harsh as they are in the United States, they're still unnecessarily harsh. In Denmark, it is punishable by up to 2 years. 2 years being locked up, or a fine. There is, however, a region known as Freetown Christiania that claims to be autonomous from Denmark and is known for their cannabis trade. So, if you like weed, you might want to check that out. In Finland, you can only use marijuana for medical purposes. Now, that's extremely limited. And also, let's say you're not using it for medical purposes, you're not locked up, but you're still fined. Sweden has a national zero tolerance policy for marijuana, which is just plain statist. I think they'll potentially lock you up and fine you, just like in the United States. If you notice, this is completely against the Bernie Sanders type socialists that they want. Marijuana is illegal under the system Bernie Sanders said he wants to adopt. Maybe they should research more of Scandinavia's actual policies before they say they want it. Hopefully, over the last few minutes, I've explained the failures and false claims that Scandinavian socialism is a great utopia. But, as we have seen over the last few months, sometimes facts aren't as important as feelings. Liberals say Scandinavia is the happiest place on earth. According to several studies, it is. Sorry to break it to you, but it is not really as happy as some make it out to be. First of all, the very studies used may be flawed because of how they're conducted. Answers may differ from culture to culture. In Japan, answering yes to the question, "Are you happy?" may seem like you're gloating and bragging and stuff like that, so you may be hesitant to answer yes. While in Denmark, it may appear shameful if you're not happy. So you have a lot of answers that it's too broad of a question. So right there, your studies, sure, go ahead and say it's happy because the New York Times said so, but I'm personally skeptical of it. Now, alcoholism is a real problem throughout Scandinavia. In Denmark, alcohol-related disease is the leading cause of death for Finnish men, and it's the second leading cause for women. In Finland, 30% of the population is affected by alcoholism. 8.1% of Norwegians have alcohol disorders. Also, violent crimes are kicking up in Scandinavia. Finland leads Western Europe in murder rates. Sexual assaults are also considerably higher in Sweden than they are in the United States. They have a little over double the amount of sexual assaults per 100,000 people than what it is in the United States. Now, the suicide rate in Scandinavian countries are also higher than those in the United States and almost double those that happen in the United Kingdom. Per 100,000 people, 11.3 people will commit suicide in Denmark, 16.5 people in Finland, 11.1 people in Sweden, and 10.9 people in Norway. This compares to 10.1 people in the United States and just 6 people in the United Kingdom. By the way, I just want to point out, if you are in a dark place, suicide is never the answer. If you need someone to talk to, please call 1-800-273 8255. Never be afraid to talk to someone. So, in conclusion, I hope I was able to convince you that Scandinavian socialism does indeed suck. At the very least, I am hoping you have changed your opinions on what you really want. The United States is not perfect. We have our own problems that must be dealt with, but that does not mean we are not the greatest group of people on this planet. Here, you have the ability to change what you want to change. You have a constitution so beautifully crafted that it outlines your rights given to you by your creator, not your government. And most importantly, you have the power as an individual to determine your own rules. You are not a robot. You are a living and breathing example that you are your own self. Thank you very much for watching tonight. I hope you enjoyed.